Victoria Steele laughed when she saw the single dad stepping out of an old delivery van with his 8-year-old daughter sitting inside doing homework. Some people build companies, she mocked loudly, and some spend their lives delivering packages. The lobby erupted with laughter as employees pulled out their phones to record the humiliation. But the father never raised his voice. He simply smiled, looked at his daughter, and said, "Remember this, sweetheart. The way people treat you when they think you have nothing tells you everything about who they are." What nobody in that building knew was that the man they were mocking wasn't just a delivery driver. He was Ethan Carter, a self-made billionaire, a devoted single father, and the mysterious investor who had quietly spent 8 months buying control of their company. In less than 30 minutes, the woman laughing at him would walk into a boardroom as CEO and walk out unemployed, because the single dad she called a loser wasn't there to deliver a package. He was there to buy her entire company. Victoria Steele arrived at Steele Logistics headquarters the way she always did, surrounded by attention. Her brand new Rolls-Royce glided to a stop in front of the glass entrance, and within seconds, employees rushed forward to open doors, carry her briefcase, and greet her with nervous smiles. Victoria enjoyed moments like these. They reminded her that she was the most powerful person in the building. At 38 years old, she had built a reputation as one of the toughest CEOs in the logistics industry. But behind the magazine covers and business awards was a woman who believed a person's worth could be measured by the clothes they wore, the car they drove, and the title on their business card. As she walked through the lobby, she barely acknowledged the reception staff who greeted her. Her attention was already focused on the board meeting scheduled for later that morning. She expected another routine day of making decisions and reminding everyone who was in charge. Outside, however, another vehicle was pulling into the parking lot. It wasn't a luxury car. It wasn't even new. It was an old white delivery van that had clearly seen better days. The paint was faded. The bumper had scratches, and one of the side doors carried a small dent. Behind the wheel sat Ethan Carter. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter Lily was carefully colouring a picture while waiting for her father to finish his delivery. "Dad, are we going to get lunch after this?" Lily asked with a bright smile. Ethan looked at her and smiled back. "That's the plan, princess. Can we get pancakes?" He laughed softly. "Pancakes for lunch? They taste better at lunch." "That's not how pancakes work," Lily giggled. For a moment, the busy world outside seemed to disappear. To Ethan, these small moments with his daughter mattered far more than boardrooms, business deals, or billion-dollar investments. 8 years earlier, after losing his wife to cancer, he had promised himself that no amount of success would ever make him miss the moments that mattered most. No matter how large Carter Capital became, Lily would always come first. Ethan stepped out of the van carrying a sealed package. Lily waved through the window. "Don't forget, pancakes." "I won't." As Ethan entered the lobby, conversations began to slow. Employees noticed the delivery uniform immediately. Some barely looked at him before returning to their work. Others ignored him completely. Ethan was used to it. Over the years, he had learned that people often revealed their true character when they believed someone had no power. Then Victoria noticed him. She stopped walking. Her eyes moved from Ethan's worn delivery uniform to the old van visible through the glass doors. Then she noticed Lily sitting inside. A slow smile spread across her face. "Well, that's interesting." Several employees turned toward her. Victoria pointed toward the van. "Did anyone else see that?" The room grew quiet. She laughed. "A delivery driver, bringing his daughter to work." A few employees chuckled nervously. Victoria continued. "Times must be really tough." More laughter followed. Ethan remained calm. Victoria stepped closer. "Let me guess. Couldn't afford a babysitter?" The laughter became louder. Several employees pulled out their phones. Lily couldn't hear what was being said outside, but she could see people laughing through the glass. Confused, she watched her father stand quietly while strangers stared at him. Ethan simply smiled. "My daughter likes spending time with me." Victoria folded her arms. "Of course she does. It's not like she has many other options." The lobby erupted again. For a brief second, Ethan glanced toward Lily. Then he looked back at Victoria. His voice remained calm. "You know, Miss Steele, children learn by watching adults." Victoria smirked. "And what exactly is your daughter learning right now?" Ethan smiled. "She's learning how people treat others when they think those people can't do anything for them." The laughter stopped. Just for a moment, something about the answer made a few employees uncomfortable. But Victoria only rolled her eyes. "That's cute." Then she pointed toward her designer suit. "Tell me something. How many packages do you need to deliver before you can afford a suit like this?" The lobby exploded with laughter again. Ethan looked at the crowd, then at Victoria, then at the phones recording every second. Finally, he smiled. "Funny thing about appearances." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "What?" Ethan adjusted the package in his hand. "Sometimes the person carrying the package owns the building it's being delivered to." The room burst into even louder laughter. Victoria nearly doubled over. "Sure you do." Nobody believed him. Nobody knew that upstairs, a boardroom was preparing for the most important meeting in company history. Nobody knew that a mysterious investor had already secured control of the company's debt, shareholders, and voting power. And absolutely nobody knew that the single father standing in front of them was the billionaire responsible for all of it. Within the next hour, Victoria Steele's entire world would change forever. But at that moment, she was too busy laughing at a delivery driver to realize that the man she was mocking was about to become her new boss. The boardroom door slowly opened, and every conversation died instantly. Victoria Steele sat confidently at the head of the table, expecting to meet a powerful investor surrounded by assistants and security guards. Instead, the moment her eyes landed on the man walking through the doorway, the color drained from her face. It was him, the delivery driver, the single father she had mocked less than 30 minutes earlier, the same man whose daughter was still sitting downstairs waiting for him. For a second, Victoria thought it had to be some kind of joke. She actually laughed. "You've got to be kidding me." But nobody else laughed. Not Richard Hall, not Daniel Brooks, not the board members, not the lawyers. The silence was so heavy that Victoria could suddenly hear her own heartbeat. The delivery driver calmly walked toward the center of the room, while an elegant woman in a navy suit followed behind him carrying a thick leather portfolio. Several executives immediately recognized her. Olivia Grant, one of the most feared corporate attorneys in the country. The room seemed to tense even further. Olivia placed the portfolio on the table and addressed the board. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, I would like to formally introduce my client." She turned toward the man Victoria had laughed at. Mr. Ethan Carter, founder and chairman of Carter Capital Holdings. The room exploded into whispers. One director nearly dropped his pen. Another sat frozen with his mouth slightly open. Victoria felt her stomach drop. Carter Capital. The name hit her like a freight train. Everyone in business knew Carter Capital. It was a multi-billion-dollar investment empire with holdings across transportation, technology, real estate, and manufacturing. Yet almost nobody knew what Ethan Carter actually looked like, because he avoided interviews, avoided publicity, and rarely appeared in public. Victoria slowly looked at the man she had called a loser. Suddenly, every word she had said in the lobby came rushing back like a nightmare she couldn't escape. Ethan sat down calmly and folded his hands. "Good morning, miss." "Steele." His voice wasn't angry, it wasn't arrogant. Somehow that made everything worse. Victoria tried to recover. "You're Ethan Carter." Ethan nodded. "I am." The room remained silent. Victoria forced a nervous laugh. Why would someone like you dress up as a delivery driver? Ethan looked around the room before answering. Because uniforms reveal things that expensive suits hide. Nobody moved. Nobody even looked away. Ethan continued. For 8 months, I've been studying Steele logistics. Not just the numbers, the people. He opened a folder and slid several documents across the table. Employee complaints, exit interviews, internal reports, years of warnings that had been ignored. Victoria felt her confidence slipping away, page after page. Ethan stood and slowly walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city skyline. You know what's fascinating? He said. Most companies don't fail because of bad employees. He turned back toward the board. They fail because leaders stop listening. His eyes settled on Victoria. The room felt colder. A leader who only respects powerful people eventually creates a company where nobody feels valued. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, wanted to remind everyone of the awards she had won and the success she had created. But every excuse suddenly sounded weak, even inside her own head. Then Ethan reached into another folder and placed a photograph on the table. A warehouse employee, then another photograph. A truck driver, then another. A dispatcher. One after another. I know their names, Ethan said quietly. I know how long they've worked here. I know their families. I know which ones work double shifts to pay medical bills and which ones haven't taken a vacation in years. He paused. Do you? The question hit harder than any insult ever could. Victoria stared at the photographs and realized she didn't recognize most of the faces. The CEO of the company didn't know the people keeping the company alive, but the delivery driver did. Except he wasn't a delivery driver. He was the man who now owned their future. Around the table, board members began exchanging uneasy glances. For the first time, they weren't looking at Victoria as a leader. They were looking at Ethan. And deep inside, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Because she was finally beginning to understand the truth. Ethan Carter hadn't come to deliver a package. He had come to deliver judgment. And the worst part? The meeting had barely begun. Richard Hall slowly stood from his seat and adjusted his glasses. The atmosphere inside the boardroom had become almost unbearable. No one was speaking anymore. The confidence that Victoria Steele had carried into the room less than an hour earlier had completely disappeared. She sat frozen, staring at the documents spread across the table, while Ethan Carter remained calm, composed, and completely in control. Richard cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to proceed with the vote. One by one, voting sheets were placed in front of each board member. The sound of papers sliding across the polished table echoed through the room like a countdown to something inevitable. Victoria looked around desperately. These were people she had worked with for years, people she believed would stand beside her. Yet nobody met her eyes. Nobody offered reassurance. Nobody came to her defense. For the first time in her career, she realized she was completely alone. As the directors began marking their votes, Ethan's phone vibrated softly. He glanced at the screen and smiled. A message from Lily. Still waiting. Pancakes? A few words. A simple message from his daughter. Yet somehow it reminded him why he worked so hard in the first place. Not for power, not for headlines, not for billion-dollar acquisitions, for family. For the little girl downstairs who believed her father could solve any problem in the world. Ethan quickly typed back, "Almost done, princess." Across the room, Victoria noticed the smile on his face. It confused her. How could someone in the middle of taking over a company be thinking about anything else? Then she remembered the little girl in the van. Suddenly, an uncomfortable feeling settled in her chest. Earlier that morning, she had laughed at Ethan for bringing his daughter to work. At the time, it had seemed harmless. Now, she wasn't so sure. Richard collected the voting sheets and carefully counted them. The room held its breath. Every second felt longer than the last. Finally, he looked up. His expression revealed the result before he even spoke. The acquisition proposal from Carter Capital Holdings has been approved unanimously. The words hit Victoria like a freight train. A unanimous vote. Not one person had voted against it. Not one. Years of authority disappeared in a single sentence. Richard continued. Effective immediately, Carter Capital assumes majority ownership of Steele Logistics. Victoria lowered her head. The boardroom remained silent. No celebration, no applause. Only the quiet acknowledgement that an era had ended. Richard turned another page. As outlined in the acquisition agreement, executive leadership changes will take effect immediately. The position of Chief Executive Officer is hereby terminated. Victoria felt as if all the air had left the room. CEO. The title she had spent years building her identity around. Gone. Just like that. She slowly looked toward Ethan. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't enjoying her humiliation. And somehow, that made the defeat hurt even more. Victoria finally spoke. Why? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at her. Why what? Why didn't you destroy me? The room became silent again. Victoria swallowed hard. I humiliated you. She paused. I mocked you in front of your daughter. For the first time all morning, genuine regret appeared in her eyes. You could have humiliated me back. Ethan remained quiet for several seconds. Then he stood. Because my daughter was watching. The answer stunned everyone. Victoria blinked. Ethan continued. When Lily grows up, I want her to learn that strength isn't about getting revenge. The room listened carefully. It's about having the power to hurt someone and choosing not to. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan walked slowly toward the window. My father was a delivery driver. The room remained silent. He spent 30 years delivering packages. Ethan looked down at the city below. Most people never remembered his name. A pause. But every night, he came home exhausted, and somehow he still found time to help me with homework. Another pause. He taught me that a person's job doesn't determine their value. Victoria lowered her eyes. Every word felt directed at her, because it was. Then Ethan turned toward the board. The greatest mistake leaders make is believing they are more important than the people they lead. His gaze settled on Victoria one final time. This morning, your employees laughed because you laughed. The statement hit the room like thunder. Several directors looked uncomfortable. They knew he was right. Leadership spreads downward, respect spreads downward, and so does arrogance. Victoria could no longer look at him. For the first time, she saw the truth. She hadn't lost her company today. She had lost it long before this meeting ever started. She lost it the moment she stopped seeing people as human beings and started seeing them as status levels. The moment she believed a luxury suit made her better than a working parent. The moment she forgot that every empire is built by ordinary people doing extraordinary work. And as Ethan Carter prepared to walk out of the boardroom as the new owner of Steele Logistics, Victoria Steele finally understood something she should have learned years ago. The strongest man in the building had never been the one wearing the most expensive suit. It was the single father who spent every day fighting for his daughter while treating everyone around him with dignity. And downstairs, completely unaware that her father had just acquired an entire corporation, a little girl named Lily was still waiting for pancakes. The boardroom meeting ended, but nobody rushed to leave. The directors remained seated, still processing what had just happened. Less than 2 hours earlier, Victoria Steele had walked into the building, believing she controlled everything. Now she sat alone at the same table, while employees outside whispered about the biggest corporate shakeup in company history. Ethan Carter gathered his documents and quietly thanked the board members before heading toward the elevator. As the doors opened, he checked his watch and smiled. He was late. Not for another meeting. Not for investors. Not for reporters. He was late for pancakes. Downstairs, Lily was sitting in the reception area with a coloring book spread across her lap. One of the receptionists had brought her a juice box and a cookie while she waited. The little girl looked up the moment she heard the elevator ding. Her face immediately lit up. "Dad!" She jumped from her chair and ran across the lobby. Ethan knelt down just in time for Lily to throw her arms around his neck. "You were gone forever," he laughed. "It felt like forever, for me, too." "Did you finish your work?" "I did." "Good." Lily grabbed his hand. "Now pancakes." Several employees standing nearby couldn't help smiling. Just minutes earlier, they had discovered that the delivery driver they laughed at was one of the richest businessmen in the country. Yet, here he was, not talking about money, not giving interviews, not acting important, just being a dad. As Ethan and Lily started walking toward the exit, a voice stopped them. "Mr. Carter." They turned around. It was Victoria. For the first time all day, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like an ordinary woman, carrying the weight of her mistakes. The entire lobby became silent. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Victoria hesitated before speaking. Then she looked down at Lily. "I'm sorry." Lily blinked. Victoria swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for the way I spoke about your father." The little girl looked at Ethan, then back at Victoria. "My dad says people make mistakes." The simplicity of the answer hit Victoria harder than any speech ever could. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then Lily smiled. "But he also says good people learn from them." Victoria felt tears forming in her eyes. The words came from an 8-year-old child, yet they carried more wisdom than all the leadership seminars she had attended over the years. Ethan gently placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Ready to go?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Pancakes." Ethan smiled. "Pancakes." As they walked toward the doors, Victoria suddenly called out again. "Ethan!" He stopped. She took a deep breath. "What happens now?" Ethan turned toward her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he answered. "That depends on you." Victoria frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan glanced around the lobby. At the employees. At the receptionists. At the drivers walking in and out of the building. At the people she had ignored for years. Then he looked back at her. "You can spend the rest of your life blaming today." He paused. "Or you can become the person you should have been before today happened." The lobby remained silent. Victoria lowered her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about power. She wasn't thinking about status. She wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about character. And she realized she had neglected hers for a very long time. Ethan nodded politely and turned toward the exit. A moment later, the glass doors closed behind him and Lily. Outside, father and daughter climbed into the same old delivery van. The same van Victoria had laughed at that morning. The engine started. The van pulled away. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, Victoria found herself watching until it disappeared from sight. 3 months later, Steele Logistics looked very different. Employee satisfaction was rising. Driver retention was improving. Customer complaints were falling. Managers were spending more time on warehouse floors than in executive offices. For the first time in years, employees felt heard. As for Victoria, she quietly accepted a lower-level consulting position at a non-profit organization that helped working families find employment and childcare support. The old Victoria would have considered such a job beneath her. The new Victoria saw it differently. Every day she met hard-working parents trying to build better lives for their children. And every day she remembered Ethan Carter, the single father she once mocked, the man who could have destroyed her but chose to teach her instead. Because sometimes the most successful people aren't the ones who own the biggest companies. Sometimes they're the ones raising good children while carrying burdens nobody else can see. And sometimes the greatest lesson in life comes from the person you were foolish enough to underestimate. Because a luxury suit can impress people, a title can intimidate people, money can attract people. But character? Character is what earns their respect. And in the end, that was the lesson Victoria Steele would never forget. The single dad she laughed at didn't just buy her company, he changed her life. Months later, a framed photograph sat on Ethan Carter's office desk. It wasn't a picture of a corporate acquisition. It wasn't an award. It wasn't a magazine cover celebrating another billion-dollar success. It was a simple photo of him and Lily sitting in a small pancake restaurant, laughing over a stack of pancakes covered in syrup. Whenever visitors asked why that picture occupied the center of his desk, Ethan always gave the same answer, because that's what all of this is really for. One afternoon, Lily walked into his office after school and noticed him staring out the window. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Ethan smiled, just thinking about how fast life changes. Lily climbed into the chair beside him. "Like when you bought that company?" Ethan laughed softly. "A little. Did winning feel good?" The question caught him by surprise. After a moment, he shook his head. "It wasn't about winning." "Then what was it about?" Ethan looked at his daughter. "It was about doing the right thing." Lily thought for a second. "Even when people are mean?" "Especially then." The little girl smiled and leaned against his shoulder. Outside the office window, hundreds of employees were finishing another workday. Truck drivers were returning from deliveries. Warehouse workers were heading home to their families. Receptionists were saying goodbye to co-workers. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. People who mattered. People whose value had nothing to do with their job titles, bank accounts, or the cars they drove. Ethan had never forgotten that lesson because his father had taught it to him decades earlier while wearing a delivery uniform. And now he was teaching the same lesson to Lily. Years later, when people told the story of how Ethan Carter acquired Steele Logistics, most remembered the shocking twist. They remembered the billionaire disguised as a delivery driver. They remembered the arrogant CEO who lost everything after mocking the wrong person. But the people who truly understood the story remembered something else. They remembered a father who never allowed success to make him forget where he came from. A father who chose dignity over revenge. A father who taught his daughter that kindness is a strength, not a weakness. Because in the end, the most valuable thing Ethan Carter ever built wasn't a company worth billions of dollars. It was the example he set for the little girl watching him every day. And that example would last far longer than any business empire ever could. So if there's one lesson to take away from this story, it's this. Never judge someone by their uniform. Never judge someone by their job. And never assume you know a person's worth based on what you see on the surface. Because the strongest people are often fighting battles you know nothing about. The richest people aren't always the ones with the most money. And sometimes the person the world overlooks turns out to be the person worth admiring the most. As Ethan and Lily walked hand in hand toward another ordinary afternoon together, neither of them cared about boardrooms, stock prices, or billion-dollar deals. They were talking about pancakes, and somehow, that was worth more than all the success in the world. As we come to the end of Ethan Carter's story, perhaps the most important lesson isn't about billion-dollar companies, corporate takeovers, or dramatic boardroom victories. It's about something much simpler and much more valuable. Every day, we pass people whose stories we know nothing about. The delivery driver bringing a package to our door, the cashier helping us at a grocery store, the warehouse worker loading trucks before sunrise, The single parent rushing between work, school pickups, and endless responsibilities. Most of them will never appear on magazine covers. Most will never become famous. Yet many are carrying burdens, making sacrifices, and showing strength that the world rarely sees. Victoria Steele made the mistake that many people make. She judged a person's value based on appearances. She saw a uniform and assumed she knew the man wearing it. She saw an old van and assumed she understood his life. She saw a hard-working father and mistook humility for weakness. But life has a way of reminding us that true character cannot be measured by a job title, a bank account, or the clothes someone wears. Ethan Carter didn't become admirable because he was wealthy. He became admirable because success never changed the values that made him who he was. Even after building a business empire worth billions, he remained the same man who put his daughter first, respected people regardless of their position, and chose dignity over revenge when he had every opportunity to humiliate the person who had humiliated him. And perhaps that's what makes his story so powerful. When Ethan had the power to destroy Victoria, he didn't use it. When he had the chance to embarrass her in front of everyone, he chose restraint. When he could have turned victory into revenge, he turned it into a lesson. Because real strength isn't proving you're more powerful than someone else. Real strength is remaining kind when the world gives you every reason not to be. Real strength is treating people with respect, even when they can do nothing for you. Real strength is remembering where you came from, no matter how far you've climbed. And maybe the most beautiful part of this story isn't that Ethan bought a company. Maybe it's that Lily watched it all happen. She watched her father stay calm when others mocked him. She watched him choose grace instead of anger. She watched him lead with integrity instead of ego. And without even realizing it, she learned lessons that will stay with her for the rest of her life. Because children don't become who we tell them to be. They become who they watch us be. Long after the boardroom vote was forgotten. Long after the headlines disappeared. Long after the business world moved on to its next story, the example Ethan set for his daughter would remain. And in the end, that may have been his greatest achievement of all. So, wherever you are today, remember this. Be careful how you treat people. The person standing in front of you may be fighting battles you cannot see. The person you overlook today may be the one who changes your life tomorrow. And the greatest measure of success will never be how much money you earn, how much power you hold, or how many people admire you. The greatest measure of success is the impact you leave on the people around you and the example you set for those who are watching. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, family, justice, and second chances. Until next time, stay humble, stay kind, and remember, never judge a person by the uniform they wear. Judge them by the character they show when nobody is watching. And sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't the people standing on stages or sitting in boardrooms. Sometimes, they're simply a parent doing their best for the child waiting for them at home. See you in the next story.
Thank you for watching my